Aloha, friends. We're back with 13 Nights of Tiki Frights, and tonight we're giving away a Jekyll mug. Get that focus from Biggs Tiki on Instagram. Give them a follow, Biggs Tiki or Biggs Studio on Instagram. We're going to be giving this away to one lucky winner later tonight. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Here's a little tip. If you subscribe on YouTube, you'll be automatically entered in all our giveaways throughout the month of October, and then you don't have to keep entering them every single night. So there's a tip for you. We are sponsored by Plantation Rum, of course. Thank you to Plantation Rum for sponsoring all of 13 Nights of Tiki Frights, the mug giveaways, the cocktails, and all of our interviews. Cheers to Plantation Rum. A quick announcement. I actually have a couple mugs here, right here, from the private collection of Gecko. And Gecko has donated these mugs because Hawaii still needs money for the wildfire disasters they had. They still need money. They're still recovering. Even though the news cycle has moved on, they have not. So these mugs are from Gecko's private collection. We also have a couple Boscos that he donated as well. I'm at random going to post these on the Search for Tiki website tomorrow. If you buy them, 100% of the net proceeds are going to go to disaster relief in Hawaii. So thank you to Gecko for donating these mugs. We got 4 of them. Like I said, just check the website randomly, and maybe you'll be lucky and you'll get to pick up a couple mugs and support our really good cause as well. Tonight, we're talking to the man, the myth, the legend, Tiki Tom-Tom. He's an author and photographer of Polynesiacs, Tiki at Home, from Wong Press. You got to pick up a copy of this book. I don't want to waste any time. I want to talk to Tiki Tom-Tom. So without further ado, let's get him in here. What's happening, buddy?
Yorana.
It's good to see you.
Good to be here.
It's been a while, a short while.
A short while.
In June, I think I saw you.
Yes.
At Ohana Lu at the Lake.
Yes, a great event.
Thanks for joining us. I want to get right into it. You're the author and photographer, everything rolled into one, of Polynesiacs, a book that you can purchase now from Wong Press. Do you remember, I'm curious how you got into this, do you remember the first home tiki bar you stepped into, and what was that experience like?
I do. In fact, it's one that's profiled in the book. Howard and Jen's Bull Tiki, which is literally just like 5 miles away from me here in Durham, North Carolina. I had been to Inuhele, had started connecting with tiki folks. I thought I was the only tiki person in Durham, North Carolina. And after going to Inuhele in Atlanta, some folks connected with me like, hey, you're in Durham. I'm in Durham. And I got an invite over to Howard and Jen's, and I was like, oh, what a great bar. And so I was fortunate to be able to interview them, and they're a part of the book at this point. They're not the first one that I did in terms of the book interviews, but they are the first home bar that I ever visited, and a great example of a beautiful one. So
was Atlanta your first tiki event then?
It was, yeah. Inuhele was my first experience with the TikiCon. So, yeah, and such a great event. It's nice to connect with other folks.
We love Jonathan Chaffin. He also does Ore in Clay, which kind of fits with 13 Nights of Tiki Frights. He makes Cthulhu mugs and spooky mugs. He also does Inuhele in Atlanta. We do have a video with him, a couple of videos with him if you want to look back and see some previous episodes. But okay, so you went to Inuhele, then you went to this home tiki bar. Now, at some point, you decided you wanted to go on a road trip. And you wanted to see all the tiki bars. One tiki bar wasn't enough. You wanted to see, it was 75, 84, I don't know. I've lost count.
Yeah, it was, that idea was nowhere in my head when I started this. I was retiring. I was an executive vice president for a community college. I was ready to retire. And what I wanted to do was, first of all, I just wanted to go visit like public tiki bars across the U.S. I just wanted to do a blast out road trip. I wanted to visit as many tiki bars as I could. There was this thing called COVID that was happening, and, it kind of threw a wrench in my plans. I had just pledged to Fraternal Order of Moai at that time and had posted to the boards there just saying, hey, I'm planning on taking this trip. I'm thinking about going to these tiki bars. And several of the fellows on the board said, hey, I know, the bars are kind of iffy right now. Why don't you stop by and visit us and visit, our home bar? And I thought, oh, okay, well, that's sweet. There'll be like this nice little corner with a little, bamboo bar there, and they'll serve me a drink, with a little umbrella, and it'll be fun. And then they started sending me pictures of these home bars, and I was like, what? And that's basically how it started.
Okay.
I got invites. I got probably 10 to 15 invites from Fraternal Order of Moai people across the U.S. And I thought, well, maybe I should just focus my trip there. Maybe I should just look at home bars. And so I started with accepting those invitations. I started mapping out where they were in the US, how I could get from North Carolina to California and back. And then I started making my own invites. So I started looking at Facebook and Instagram. I started reaching out to people. I knew I didn't want to drive more than like 5 or 6 hours a day. So I would say, okay, if I got to get from here to Nashville, can I look up Nashville Home Tiki Bar on Instagram and Facebook? And I started just putting myself out there and saying, okay, I will, I'm coming by. Would you be interested in me photographing your home bar and maybe, writing a story or something like that? And lo and behold, Gabe, it's like no one turned me down.
Well, I mean, okay. This is candy to a kid, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't design, and I was talking to Tommy a little bit about this, you don't design a crazy home tiki bar with the intention of just sitting there by yourself.
Exactly.
You're doing that to show it off.
Exactly.
So I'm not entirely surprised that they didn't say no.
Well, I agree with that, but I'm also like, it was the midst of COVID. Like people were like welcoming into their homes. It was a weird time. But, in that first, I spent 5 weeks on the road in my truck driving across the U.S. And in that span, I ended up doing 35 tiki bars across the U.S. And from that 35, I just got excited by it, and I started adding in. I added a trip up to New York at that point. I did several bars there. I added a trip down to Florida. I did around 10 bars in that trip. By the time I had reached 50 bars, I got the attention of Sven Kirsten. And Sven said, hey, Oceanic Arts is doing a closing at this point. You might want to come talk about what you're learning about home tiki bars. I said, sure, I'd be glad to do that. Before that event happened, I decided, well, maybe I should visit the Pacific Northwest. I did 9 bars in the, Portland, Seattle area. And then the whole basically trip was going out to present at Oceanic Arts. And there I did 14 bars in 10 days. And it was amazing, but yeah, my liver also
exhausting.
Exhausted by that time, but yes.
So does it pretty much align?
75.
Does it align geographically? So the home tiki bars, commercial tiki bars, right? The Mecca is kind of San Francisco, and then LA, San Diego, Florida. You've got some, a couple in Chicago. Do the home tiki bars pretty much map out in a similar fashion? Maybe we can pull up that map again.
Yeah, I would say what I found was that home tiki bars are definitely influenced by the presence of active tiki bars. So whether those were historic bars in places like Houston, or whether they're active bars like Kansas City and Tiki Cat, which is no longer open, where there was a public tiki bar gathering people together, there were often home bars, more than one home bar kind of associated with that. So yes, there's definitely association.
So we have to thank all the commercial tiki bars. Not that we don't do that anyways, but they're the ones driving this. So go and support your local tiki bar. They're always closing. We just had one announced it's closing tomorrow or Saturday, Tiki Island here, which is sad. So, but it happens, so we got to support the bars while we can. Backing it up a little bit though, your book, Polynesiacs. Your name, Tiki Tom-Tom. How'd you choose those names?
So Tiki Tom-Tom, I gave myself. Someone didn't give it to me, but I love exotica music. Tom-Tom is an example of a drum that's actually used in exotica music, and I just felt like that was fun play kind of on words at this point. I also have to admit, I kind of like the Tom-Tom from the standpoint of like a bad joke, like, it's like the Tom-Tom kind of piece at this point. So that's where that, particular name came from. Polynesiacs is actually Sven Kirsten's term. So as I was thinking of titles for the book, I was trying to think of what to use as a common term for people that I interviewed. I didn't really like the term Tiki Files. I wanted to use something different from that. And when I was having conversation with Sven, he said Polynesiacs is another word that no one really uses, but I like the term. And I ended up just adopting it and saying, yeah, I think that's a great term to use. It gives me a connotation of a little bit manic about Polynesian pop. So I like it.
Yep. And we got to talk to Sven Kirsten about Polynesian pop too. So all these people that are coming up, we've also had on the show. So go, people check out after this one, Sven Kirsten's interview with us. But
absolutely,
I want to pick your brain a little bit because you've seen a lot of home tiki bars, and it's probably safe to assume you're one of the people that has seen the most home tiki bars out there. So with that said, the majority of the tiki bars that you saw, were they built from the ground up, or did they convert existing spaces in their house?
Absolutely, most were converting existing spaces. There were a few examples of people who built from scratch, literally like built a building outside or something like that. But I would say of the 75 in the book, at least 65, maybe 70 were existing spaces in their houses.
And is there a particular room of the house that was more frequently converted than others?
It's typically the basement or the bonus room, one of those two at this point. Certainly there are some fun examples of that not being the case. In fact, I loved going to the Huna Huna hut where their master bedroom, this is the room they sleep in, actually is their tiki bar, and they literally move the bed out of the room in order to host parties in this space. So I was like, that's dedication to tiki, I tell you. But
that would get old. That would get old very fast. Yeah.
But
I'm in a 2-bedroom apartment, and we're talking about having a Halloween party. We were literally, Angela and I, 2 hours ago, I was like, oh, okay, so we got to take the bed down again. She was like, I don't want you to take the bed down again. Yep. So, what is the, if for people that are considering making their own home tiki bar, what is the average size of the space? Like, what capacity are we talking about in most of these home tiki bars?
I would say most, just in terms of general size, think in terms of a bedroom or something like that would be the average size. Those that are in basements tend to be a little bit larger, just depending upon using the full basement. But yeah, it's typically just a 1-room size. I would say most home tiki bars are going to easily accommodate kind of 10 people or something like that.
I imagine one of the benefits of being in the basement is oftentimes no windows, or if you have windows, little windows. And that's always one of the things with tiki bars. Jason T. Smith. Guys, Jason is always in the background of these videos helping us with all the slides. Jason T. Smith of Polynesian Pop Tiki Collectors Group. So shout out to Jason. But yeah, he's in Vegas with no basements. We have basements here, but I digress. So light is always a challenge in tiki spaces because it's immersion. You don't want to see the outdoors unless you're living in Hawaii. Are there other creative ways that people have dealt with light other than just kind of putting them in the basement?
Yeah, and I'm telling you, I'm a bit of a rogue when it comes to natural light and home tiki bars. Okay, so here's my philosophy on this. Certainly, if your goal is to emulate a commercial bar does completely eliminate light. It wants you to create a space where you're never going to leave, right?
Yep. It's like a casino.
Exactly.
You lose track of time.
But honestly, if you're looking for authenticity of home bars from the 50s and 60s, they had natural light. So my point here is that it really depends on what you're going for. If you're looking for a home environment that is tiki, in some ways that gives you a little bit more flexibility than thinking in terms of a commercial, creating a commercial type bar in your home at that point. Now, basements, absolutely, they give you that control over light, those kinds of things. But I would just say I saw so many wonderful examples of people using natural light, and felt very, at home, like this is tiki, this is magical at that point. And so to answer the second question you had, where people are doing wonderful things is that they're extending their tiki beyond the windows, right? So if you're using natural light, you may be planting bananas behind your windows, like at the Bull Tiki when I first visited them, or you just think in terms of how you extend that space out so that you create that illusion of immersion.
Okay. That kind of goes with just this whole thought of having a narrative to your tiki bar. Did you find that most tiki bars have kind of a narrative that people have come up with, or are they just kind of like putting stuff on the walls and making it look really good?
Did most have a narrative? I'm not sure I would say most have a narrative, but I will say that the ones that affected me the most, the ones that I had the wow factor, did have a sense of story. And what I mean by story can be something that you create, like just you're figuring out, some kind of fictional story. But I also think story just has to relate to who you are and how you're connected. So stories can be connection to public tiki bars of the past. It can be connection to family experiences. I've seen so many home tiki bars where people used, their grandfather's experiences in serving in World War II, and things like that felt very grounded. So I definitely write about that in the book. I think that what can set you apart is thinking about how story influences your home tiki space.
You just reminded me of this complete tangent, but Thor, the artist Thor, recently did a cover art for Exotica Moderne, which is a tiki magazine. If you don't purchase it, get a copy of Exotica Moderne from Ken. But the art that he did it was in a basement, and the family was like, around a boiler, I believe it was, and the boiler kind of looked like a kind of a tiki face or whatever. And I guess that was a story from his childhood that and for him, the narration of tiki is different for everyone. And, you just got to make it personal to you. It doesn't necessarily have to have this crazy in a galaxy far, far away narrative. But like you said, you just make it personal.
Yeah, I think story moves you from decor to experience, if that makes sense. It's like if all you're doing is basically putting a lot of tiki items in a space and saying this is pretty, that's one thing. But when you take the time to pull those things together in terms of something that's really relatable and emotional to you, like family or something like that, it really touches you in a different way.
Do you have one moment that comes to mind where you walked into a space and you're like, wow, like this is why I'm doing this?
Yeah, I know you're going to think I'm totally like lying on this, but there's too many moments. There's too many moments to mention that, because there were so many times when I walked into spaces and I thought, I talk about this in the epilogue for the book. One of the things that I did not expect is I did not expect to be wowed by so many of these bars. And it happened to me so many times. I would walk in the door and I would be like, damn, like this is a creative space. This is like amazing. And the level with which people had dedicated themselves to the creativity and all the things that they had collected. So I'm not cheating, I promise, but there were too many moments of that.
Okay.
And it kept happening.
I haven't heard the moments yet, so I haven't decided if you're lying or if you're cheating.
All right.
So what were the moments?
Well, okay, so you've got an example here of Caroline's. Caroline's is an example of kind of, I would call the Taj Mahal of home tiki bars. This place is huge. It is built from scratch. it accommodates, easily a crowd of 30 to 40 at this point, and it is just gorgeous. So the wow factor with Caroline's is just, there's so much space, there's so much in her collection. It's like there's so much to take in. When you look back at Josh's, which is another picture on the slide at that point in Ventura, his wow factor has to do with connection with people. So he built his bar with the help of several friends. One of the things you don't see in this picture is that on the back of each of those chairs is the name of a person who helped him build the bar, and that is their dedicated seat for that bar. And that's a wow moment in a different way, right? It's kind of like, wow, I feel like this is a place that is grounded in like friendship and ohana. And then, Jesse and Jason's up there. This is a couple who kind of, built this whole thing together. They told me wonderful stories about, being up late on New Year's Eve and basically, the frustrations and joys of kind of building this space. Those are also its own wow factor of how relationships grow deeper because of, it seems crazy, but like they built a home tiki bar and it actually was a way for them to bond. So there's lots of wows. They're just all different.
Lots of wow. Too many to choose. Yeah. Here's a question for you. One thing I struggle with. I'm dabbling in photography. I am not a professional photographer by any means, but when you're hanging out with someone and you're also trying to take photos, sometimes it's kind of hard to balance. Mm-hmm. Did you feel like you had enough time to visit with people and take photos, or how did you balance those?
Yeah, this was a tough decision that I made. And so my typical interview was I would tell the individual, I'm going to be in your home for 2 hours. And the first hour, we're going to talk. And the second hour, leave me alone. And the first hour was basically, I want to learn as much as I could. I had a recorder with me. I would use that to kind of, talk about their story, what to gain from them. But the second was, I want to take pictures of your bar. Now, the challenge was in 1 hour, how do I capture this bar? Because, I had been to some bars. They were like, yeah, you're only going to be here an hour because when the professional photographer came, he spent 8 hours and he set up lighting and all this kind of stuff. And why aren't you doing that? And I didn't want to throw the idea of me coming in and doing a professional bar shoot. I really wanted to be a little bit more organic. And so that had its advantages and disadvantages. Certainly, the advantage was the conversation in the bar. I did not add any light to any photograph I took. I didn't, I took what was there. That was a challenge with regard to low light, and figuring out how to make that work. But the disadvantage was there were lots of times when I would go back and go, oh my God, I wish I had had more time. I wish I had gotten this better shot or things like that. So it went by really fast.
That's actually one of the questions that I was going to ask you, if you ever missed a shot. And I guess the follow-up question would be, did you ever go back? Were you ever like so distraught about something that you're like, I got to go back to this place and take this photo again?
I never had the chance to go back, but I will say a shout out to Justin and Mo's Hale Mano in Nashville. They were one of the first bars that I shot. And I have often told them every time I've seen them at the conference, like, I want to come back. One of the things I learned a little too late, about halfway into the first trip, was I was trying to be a purist. I was trying to use my camera only. I have a Canon basic, lens at this point. I was trying to do my best on manual mode to capture as much light as possible. What I did not do was also use my phone. And frankly, I should have done that. Because the difference in what a camera can capture in terms of bokeh and focus, particularly in close-up light, is very different from what the phone and the computer graphics that are built into that can capture with multiple points of light. And so it was later in my trip when I learned that using both tools was the right combination, because the phone could capture wider shots and the camera could capture more detail and closer shots at that point. And the Hale Mano is just one of those ones that's like, oh my gosh, I just missed the opportunity to capture the wide shots of that bar. It's such a gorgeous bar.
Did you? I find when I'm shooting pictures, right, over a period of time, right, you improve pretty quickly in photography, and you can kind of look back and be like, wow, I suddenly don't like those photos that I really liked, and the next thing you know, you're buying more equipment. Did you find as you were doing all these home tiki bars that you were maybe stopping at Best Buy on the route someplace? And
I really resisted. I'm proud of myself for resisting that urge, but at some
kudos to you.
point, the original Canon that I had actually bit the dust. And so I had to buy a new camera. I got a Canon R5 at that point, and it was nice to have full frame photography at that point, which was very different than what I had been originally shooting. But, I'm very much a hobbyist photographer. I'm not a photographer by trade or anything like that. I think my strength as a photographer is composition and post-production. And so, yeah, there's been many an hour with Lightroom going, how can I take this completely dark photograph and actually pull the light back out of it? So
Thank God for raw files.
absolutely.
Always shoot raw files. Yeah, and it helps when you're photographing really cool spaces. Not to diminish, but subject matter always makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
And you're fortunate to have gone to so many cool places.
Absolutely.
I have to asking for a friend.
Mm-hmm.
How do people get invited to these tiki bars? Like, you've already written the book, so you've taken that offer off the table. So we got to get creative. We got to come up with some other solutions.
Yeah. So, in the beginning, of course, it was. I have to, thank Fraternal Order of Moai for kind of giving me initial invitations. Then I was the one asking, and I was in a position of saying, hey, you don't know me from Adam. I haven't produced a book. I haven't written anything. Would you let me into your home for 2 hours and talk to you? Of course, all that has changed now that the book is out. Like, I'm getting invites to home bars. In fact, the fun trip, had I, lots of money and no expenses, I've been invited to travel the world, literally. So, there are home bars in England, all throughout Europe, Belgium, France, Sweden, Germany. Several have invited me to come visit, as well as Australia and Canada. So it's like, had I the funds, there's a opportunity for, the international version of Polynesiacs at this point. So
someone asked if there was going to be a book too. So does that mean you are not done? You want to see more home tiki bars?
Well, it's interesting. Actually, I do have an idea for book 2, but it's not specific to home tiki bars. Okay. So I'm actually fascinated by Polynesiacs. And so I think actually where I would like to head for book 2 is actually interviewing the artists, musicians, craftspeople of our movement. One of the things I've heard is that there's been a lot written, of course, about the origins of tiki, but not a lot about the Renaissance of tiki. And so there's so many contributions that people have made over the last 20 years around tiki in terms of the arts that I think it'd be interesting to do, a new trip to visit artists around the U.S. So that's where my mind is right now.
100%. I would adopt that book gladly. Would you kind of like limit the number of artists in a category, for example? So like X amount of tiki carvers, X amount of mug makers, X amount of musicians, so on and so forth?
I guess what I'm thinking more in terms of just making sure I represent all the various arts. So music is an expansive category in itself, surf, exotica, all the musicians that are out there. Art in terms of, two-dimensional art, people like Don Frazier, things like that are doing amazing work. But then there's also, the craftspeople, the people who are producing woodworking or carving, There's, fabric artists like my friend Rocket Betty. There's all these people who are like just out there doing some amazing things. And I just think their stories about why they're obsessed with tiki are just as interesting as the home bar folks. So
I love so Rocket Betty in particular.
Mhm.
I know nothing about clothing. Okay, this is the first year I'm actually wearing Aloha shirts for this because I usually
Yeah.
wear black T-shirts. But enough people complained that I rallied and I got some Aloha shirts. Now, with that said, as someone that knows nothing about clothing, I go to the tiki events like Tiki Oasis or
Mhm.
Inuhele or wherever it is, and I'll see someone and I'll be like, they look really good. I bet that's Rocket Betty. And it always is.
That would
100%
be a fair
of
assumption.
the
Yes.
time. So
Mhm.
kudos to Rocket Betty. Making
Absolutely.
people stand out for even the people that don't know what they're looking at.
I'm very fortunate to literally live down the road from Rocket Betty, so she and I are good friends.
She did a great presentation at Ohana
Hmm.
Lua at the Lake. You've mentioned, or we've mentioned Ohana Lua at the Lake a couple times.
Yeah.
So let's maybe take a step back and talk about FOM, the Fraternal Order of Moai. You're a member now. What is it? What is FOM?
Mhm. So Fraternal Order of Moai really is, that kind of secret society, if you will, of Polynesiacs at this point. And so the goal here with FOM is to, I like to always quote, we are doing, fun with a purpose. And that is, that shows up in Ohana. One of the things that makes Ohana slightly different from the other tiki cons is that there's a real emphasis on fundraising. We do a lot of work to raise money for scholarships for students who are from Rapa Nui to actually attend college in Chile. And so, I love that there is this kind of focus for the attention through Fraternal Order of Moai on giving back. And that's the reason I was really drawn to the organization.
Which huge kudos to them for raising all the money for Hawaii, the recent disaster.
Amazing
And
amount. Yeah.
Lahaina. It was, I forget the exact number, so don't quote me, but I think it was like $70,000.
Yes. Yes.
So kudos to them. I have a shot. This was my first time going to Ohana Lua at the lake, and they do something that's a little bit different than perhaps the other tiki events called the. Well, there's two things. We'll start with the home bar crawl, where they set, rather than having these liquor sponsors come in, big brand liquor sponsors, just members put together booths and they theme them in special ways. I think I have a photo of one of them here.
Yeah.
I'll pull it up here. But basically what they did is they took a room and they blacked it out. This was this past year. And it was like an Indiana Jones, you're walking on the fire and there are people in cloaks and you get your cocktails here, home batch cocktails. And it's just, it's fun, man. It's very
Absolutely.
fun. It's totally different than any of the other tiki events I've been to. And then the other thing that they do that was, I don't even know if I'm allowed to show a photo, but the mystery bowl.
Yeah.
So at the end of Ohana Lua at the lake, they do the mystery bowl, where there's usually like 4 or 5 different bowls, tiki bowls, and people bid on them. And whoever bids the most money, which is all donated to charity through FOM, they get the mystery bowl, and they get a dance.
Yes.
A dance. And I think the mystery
might even call it a lap dance, but yeah, sometimes
dance?
there's a dance. Yeah.
I think, you know what? I think we should just show a photo.
Yes.
Right there.
Yes.
There's a photo of the mystery bowl.
Yes.
And it gets a little bit, this was taken maybe mid dance. So
that's right.
Take from that what you will.
You have no idea what's going to happen next. That's right.
But I hate to say it.
Dances are amazing. They raise an amazing amount for charity. So yeah.
And everybody's hooting, everybody's hollering, everybody's having a good time. It's probably the most amount of fun in an hour in an enclosed space that I've ever seen at a tiki event. So
And you never know what crazy things are going to happen in a mystery dance. So yes.
That is true. That is true. Um, okay, so you became a member. It's a secret society.
Mm-hmm.
Did they make you do anything weird? This is
Of
this
course,
is this is safe space, Tiki Tom-Tom. Was
it is
this
a
like a
safe space,
fraternity?
but it's a secret society. I can't tell you those things. You got to walk the path.
So he's an actual, he's going to protect you guys.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yep.
Well, we don't know if there's any secret induction ceremony to become a Order of the Fawn, but people will have to go out there and research it on their own and maybe meet a couple Fawn members and ask around. That's how you get invited to the tiki bars.
Yep.
And
Go to the boards. Go to the boards. Basically, post yourself on the boards.
I'm going to ask you one other question.
Okay.
And, hopefully it's not shrouded in mystery.
Okay.
But if you got to turn me down, you got to turn me down. The goat.
All I can say, Gabe, is beware.
So you're not going to tell me.
Yeah. Oh, I love. Yeah. I love it. Yes.
Yes, we've got the goat.
This is an amazing black velvet of the goat, basically from Makikomo, that I bid on in one of the kind of fundraising things at this point. So, yeah, and thanks for featuring this photo, because this is actually I've had a lot of fun with routing these days, and this is a frame that I made very recently to shroud the goat.
Yes, I wanted to ask you about that, the woodworking, because I think you also did kind of a class recently.
I did, yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Class.
So Jeff Freer, Jeff's a good friend of mine who also does some carving at this point, and I've been dabbling in routing. So has Jeff at this point. We're both here in Durham, and I'm a former educator. I know that one of the things that helps me learn the best is if I take responsibility for teaching a skill. And so, if I put out there like 6 weeks from now, I'm going to teach a class in this, it's like I feel the responsibility to actually learn that skill at a deeper level than I would, if I had, not taken that responsibility. So this is a great picture of the group of 11 of us that did a routing class. Is actually this past Sunday, and from 10 until 2. And, based upon the skills that Jeff and I had learned, what we did was walk them through the process of, how to design something, how to transfer the design, how to route it in the wood, the choice of router, how to burn the wood, how to basically finish it at this point. And so this is the proud recipients of their
So you think it went well? You gave yourself an artificial deadline, and then you pushed. Were you nervous going into it, or did you feel confident by the time you reached your deadline?
I was totally nervous. Yeah. Just like any good instructor is like, what the hell am I doing at this point? Why did I decide to do this? But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And, I've done this enough in education or a professional career to know that this is how you push yourself to really learn something. And so it worked. And I think people had a great time. So.
Definitely looks like it from the photos. When you're looking at designs like this, now were you looking at maybe carvings and books and stuff, or were you kind of just like, I'm gonna do some doodles and from my brain and kind of go with it?
So a little bit of both. Certainly from my home bar visits across the U.S., I saw a lot of amazing routing. The one person I would lift up is Derek Weaver. From California. His routing is amazing. His home bar is just gorgeous with regard to what he has created with regard to routing. And so paying attention to him and looking at all of the work that he has done, and then just kind of scanning all of the photographs that I took of, the bars across the U.S. One of the things I believe very strongly is that it's very important not to copy artists. It's important to be inspired by them, but to then take that to be inspired and create your own. So what I did in the design was look at a lot of designs that I had seen and basically make them into something new or different. And that's what you see is I I had given the class 4 different templates that they might use. And some actually took them directly, but others were like, I'm going to take pieces of this and put it together. So even they were doing some creative work with it.
I kind of like the tiki here in the middle.
Yeah.
This one.
Yeah.
So one of the questions we got from early arriver, would a router work from Harbor Freight to achieve something like this? Is it a particular router that you guys are using, or is it?
Yeah, so the basic things I would ask you with regard to looking at routers is there's 2 different types of routers. One is a plunge router, which basically goes kind of up and down. In tiki carving, that's really helpful when you're carving in the middle of wood. Fixed routers can also work at that point, but they're designed more for kind of the outer sides of the wood. And so it really has to do more with what you're comfortable with. And so we were using a combination of either one of those routers. Harbor Freight's certainly one of the many places you could get a router. But to me, the things to look at would be whether you want a fixed, whether you want a plunge, whether you want one with variable speed, because speed can make a difference with regard to kind of moving through the wood.
What kind of wood are you using?
Good question. So a lot of people choose poplar because it's available and because it is more consistent in terms of grain. I actually, for the picture you showed earlier, actually just used a select pine. I like the character of pine because it's a little more rough. So it has to do with more like what effect you're looking for. You can get more precision, I think, with poplar. You can get a little bit more roughness or character with pine. You can use a lot of different woods, but those tend to be the 2 that are most easily available at things like Home Depot or Lowe's or things like that. So,
okay. Obviously, routing is a little bit easier than carving a gigantic tiki like the one behind you. Do you believe anyone can do like routing? Should people just get out there and do it?
Yeah, I definitely think routing is an easier skill to accomplish than carving. I have a very healthy fear of power tools. After hearing so many stories from people across the U.S. about I almost lost my arm when I tried that power, the chainsaw, that kind of stuff. Chainsaws scare me a little bit more than routers. I'll have to say that. And so I was willing to go with routers.
I think that's fair.
So yeah, I mean, it feels a lot more controlled when you're using a router than perhaps a chainsaw.
This is a complete tangent, but I'm right there with you. My grandmother had, I don't know how many kids, maybe 13 kids. And they would do these family days where you prepare for the winter. Everybody would come over and help get the house ready. And I went there, I don't know, I must have been 12 or something. And they gave me some kind of tool. I remember I just never used tools before. And I went to use it. And all of a sudden, my shirt caught on fire.
Oh!
And I put out the fire and it cut like a giant hole in the middle of the shirt.
Oh my.
So for the rest of the day, I was just walking around with, a hole. So I'm not best with the power tools either, but I think I could probably do a little bit of routing.
Yeah, I will say one of the things I really appreciated about the class and also having the opportunity to talk with so many people is that I don't think just using the YouTube videos and, kind of diving into the routing. I really liked having someone to kind of mentor me and talk me through the process. And I think the class is a way to go with that because it makes you feel a little bit more comfortable using the power tools. Yeah.
Do you think you will ever attempt to carve a tiki or?
I'm just bold enough to try things that are not good for me. Yes. So there probably will be a chainsaw in my future, but yeah.
One can hope. I would love to see it. Hopefully you'll share posts on Facebook if the day ever comes. Going into we're talking a little bit about the woodworking, but I'm also curious about your photography and how much experience you had going into Polynesiacs. I know you called yourself, I think you said, hobbyist photographer. Had you done any kind of, professional photography up to that
Very
point?
limited. I've always had an interest in photography. I've always been a hobbyist in photography, mostly, landscape and things like that. I took photography in college way, way back when you actually had to develop film and work in a dark room and,
Yep.
move your hand like this to shade things. So those skills help translate into understanding how to use digital format as well, and tools. But it was a big jump for me to move to Lightroom and, kind of understanding how to use those tools. Honestly, for the trip itself, as I was posting on social media, I used Snapseed on my phone. That was the easiest thing for me to do. But then when I got to the publication for the book and actually creating resolution of photographs, I had to move to Lightroom Classic or some other, kind of tool to get to that point. But yeah, it's funny for me to look at my name and see terms like author and photographer next to them. I never have been a writer. I never have been a photographer. I just am perhaps stupid or bold enough to put myself out there and say, I'm going to do it. And I'm obsessed like most Polynesiacs to get out there and try to do my best at it. So
I think it's fair to say, you're still, even today, calling yourself a hobbyist photographer.
mhm.
I think it's okay to call yourself a professional photographer.
I don't know if I can do it.
I think you can. As soon as you've been published and your name is right on the front, Polynesiacs, I think you stopped being a hobbyist photographer and you did it, man. You're a legit photographer. So
Thank you.
kudos to you. Give yourself the credit. Speaking of the book, though, Polynesiacs, and it's published by Wonk Press. That's
Yes.
right. How did you get published? Is there a story there?
Yeah, this is just like the stars aligning. So when I started the trip, I actually was moving from North Carolina to Atlanta to Nashville, and I decided to stop in New Orleans. And I had gotten a copy of Minimalist Tiki by Matt Petrick. And I was just impressed that he had self-published the book. And so I knew that he'd lived in New Orleans. And I decided I'm going to spend the night in New Orleans. I'm going to invite him to meet me at Latitude 29. He agreed to do it. We had a drink. Basically, I said, I would like to learn everything I possibly can about, publishing your own book at this point. Totally with the idea that I was doing this all myself, that I was going to self-publish. By the end of that conversation, Matt said, hey, by the way, Carrie, his wife, we're thinking about actually taking on other people in terms of publication. We should just stay in contact. I was like, okay, I should stay in contact with this guy. And basically throughout the trip, he continued to follow me. Carrie continued to have conversations with me. And I was their first client for Wonk Press that wasn't Matt. And I'm honored to be that person. Carrie is an amazing layout artist, designer at this point. And so the process was I had all the photographs, I had all the writing. I basically handed that over to Carrie. Carrie basically designed the entire book based upon what we, talked about in terms of how we wanted it to look and things like that. She, kind of gave it back to me at this point. And it was wonderful because basically she and I had kind of very alike minds with regard to how the book might look. So it just worked exceptionally well.
So basically what you're saying to all the authors that, they send their books out to like 100 different publishers and then they get the sad rejection letters. They just got to take them to Latitude 29. That's what it comes down to.
Well, maybe there is a lesson to learn. Like, if you invite somebody for a tiki drink, there's something magical to the process. But yeah, what I would say is that It's all about the connections you make and the willingness you got to put yourself out there. You got to make the connections. So
Mhm.
I feel extremely fortunate to have made that connection. And I know I'm very lucky on that.
There's just something warmer, right? The face-to-face conversation, engaging the people in person, than just kind of getting something in the mail that you've never seen before.
Exactly.
But we're all thankful that it worked out.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any suggestions for people that are looking to get published in regards to?
It really has to do with making the connections and talking with folks and having those conversations and putting yourself out there. I've had conversations with folks who are writing books right now, or it's saying, "Can you connect me?" Those kinds of things. All of that is what you should do. Pitch your ideas, put yourself out there, have the conversations, invite people to have a cocktail. Absolutely.
9 times out of 10, at least I've found, if there's something that makes me uncomfortable, okay, I don't like live streams. I never would have done this. But I found that if something makes you uncomfortable, that's probably a sign that you should do it.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of push your limits a little bit, and that's where growth happens. That's where you meet people. That's where all these exciting things happen. I had no idea when I launched my website to search for Tiki that I was going to get to talk to all these cool artists like yourself. If I hadn't launched that website, that never would have happened. So you just got to put yourself out there. Looking at this this book, you've set it up basically. Let me get this right. Like navigation points.
Yeah.
Consider the nav points. And it walks you through, I'll just read a couple of them. Tell a story, chart a course, consider authenticity, be eccentric, preserve the past, all these aspects of having a home tiki bar. When you were doing this tour, did you have an idea of the nav points, or did that come later as you were pulling all the photographs together?
It's a great question. And it was absolutely the second, because my professional background is counseling. And so I'm primarily, I think of myself as a listener. And so it wasn't until I finished all 75 interviews with folks that I thought, now I should go back and I should listen with a different lens. I should listen to what are the themes that I'm hearing at this point. And so I felt a responsibility as an educator to say, what can I share back? Not only can I share the fun stories and the enchanting stories of the people who've done these tiki bars, but what do they have in common? What do they have to share with people who are going through the same process? And so I was listening I went back and listened to all of those recordings that I had recorded. And I started listening for themes. What did I see in terms of what was common among all the creators? And at the same time, I was also following the Koholeha, which is the Polynesian Voyaging Society voyages. This is the vessel that has no GPS system or any sense of navigation other than using what's in the stars, what's in the winds, those kinds of things. And I was inspired that the journey was somewhat similar, that there's no right way to build a home tiki bar. There's basically just directions, points of sailing that you would at this point. And so that's what inspired me to do nav points. Here are directions that you could choose to, kind of further develop your home tiki bar. And that's why it felt more like a navigation than necessarily a how-to book, if that makes sense.
I love it.
Yes.
I love it. Did you have like a, Apple hitting you on the head kind of? This is it.
That would be fun. That would be fun. Yes, actually, conversations with my husband, Leslie, about the book over time, he was the one, he was like, it sounds like you're almost describing a voyage. And that's what got me kind of thinking about it. So, yeah.
Were there any common themes that you saw in the majority of these bars that were not tiki? Just things that coincidentally everybody was doing outside of the maybe Polynesian sphere?
So, I would say every bar that I visited had an element of tiki to it. So there was definitely a common theme of tiki. What were commonalities?
Just anything
Uh-huh.
outside of the. We can let's pull up Sven Kirsten's Circle of Tiki. A lot of people have talked about the Circle of Tiki, and we can take a quick look at that.
Yeah.
But basically, what Sven breaks down, and I don't want to speak for Sven, but just looking at this, 50% Tiki, and then you have little bits of other things kind of thrown in there to make up the Circle of Tiki, which is nautical stuff that we talked about, mid-century modern, exotica. He's even got like monsters and Star Wars and pirates, and those are lesser.
Yes.
But is there anything that like the pirates, for example, is there anything that particularly stood out as very common, but not necessarily tiki?
If
not, that's okay.
So the reason I laugh is that the first thing that came to mind was Star Wars.
Okay.
Because I talk about this in the book in terms of authenticity or eccentricity, and I think of it in my visits as Sven's circle, which is articulating authentic tiki style as being one specific end of that continuum, to the opposite of that continuum being very eccentric style, meaning a combination of a lot of different pop elements being Star Wars, monsters, things that are beyond Polynesian art. I saw examples of Pan-Pacific art at this point, so things that would also include Alaskan, or things like that. So the things I felt that were common among that is that this really was a continuum. There were probably 5 or 6 bars that I would consider very high on the authentic scale, and maybe 5 or 6 bars that were very much on the eccentric scale. But most of what I visited actually were a combination, a creative and beautiful combination of all of those styles together. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, people are playing with style quite a bit.
I always find it interesting because, it's not uncommon. You'd go to a tiki bar and you'd see like a jaguar or a tiger. Tigers aren't from that area. Or oftentimes you'll go into into an antique store and they have like a Polynesian section. You'll see like African, tribal masks kind of snuck in there with the Papua New Guinea stuff. And I think, sometimes it's because people don't know the difference, mm-hmm. between African and Polynesian. But for some people, it probably doesn't matter either, because mm-hmm. it's just kind of that exotic, immersion thing. One of the other things that's always kind of thrown me is mid-century modern, because mid-century modern and tiki are very connected in a lot of ways. A lot of people that have tiki bars also have mid-century modern aesthetics going on. But tiki is very stuff-oriented. Okay, you go to a tiki bar and it's usually like jammed to the gills. Every space is utilized. And mid-century modern is kind of the opposite of that. And I've always kind of had a hard time rationalizing why those two things are so intertwined.
So here I'm also going to challenge that assumption, because this is my thought on that after visiting all these home bars. I think that the stuff argument is actually an influence of Disney on tiki. Disney introduced adventuring and traderism as the primary influence of tiki in my mind. And so when you see people that are very much influenced by Disney, when they create their home bars, they tend to have a lot of things. They tend to have a very adventurer bar They tend to have, trader style with lots of things, thatch, lots of items on the roof and things like that. But I would say my challenge is go back and look at the photographs from the 50s and 60s of the actual bars from Tiki, and you will not see that level of stuff, to use your word, in the bars. And so mid-century actually is very much a Tiki style that I don't see as much reflected in home bars today, because home bars, particularly those who are younger, who are influenced by Disney as their primary source of Tiki influence, they tend to think more in terms of it's more an adventure or explorer type bar. And so I would just introduce the question to everyone. Go back and look at the photographs of the 50s and 60s and tell me, do you have more stuff in your bar than those photographs? And I bet you do. And so I just think if your aim is authenticity, I actually think you can actually have more of a minimalist mid-mod approach when you look at those spaces.
Does that mean the adage of a tiki bar is never really finished, which kind of goes to that Disney of Disney is never finished, will always be expanding Disney. Come to think of it, do you think maybe that's just a way to justify our addiction to stuff, and maybe we could set up a more minimalist tiki bar and call it done?
Well, I have a different answer for that one. So I think that the reason a tiki bar is never done is because Polynesiacs as a personality trait are obsessive and creative. And they are never going to rest. They're always going to be thinking about what can I create next and what can I make better, the combination of those two traits. And that's why it's never going to be done. Even when it's perfect, they're like, I'm tearing it out. I'm building bar 3. So, it's just part of the personality, I think, of being a Polynesiac.
I love it. What would so you were talking about, a younger generation who's kind of under the Disney influence in their home tiki bar design. Looking at the bars that you went to, how many of them were built in the past 5 years? Like, what's the average age of a home tiki bar today?
Yeah, of the 75 that I went to, most were within the 5-year range.
Okay.
The oldest bar that I visited, home bar, was 17 years old. The newest bar I was the first visitor. But most were within the 5 years. And I'll say that one of the things I often tell home bar builders is that they set too high of an expectation for themselves in year 1 and year 2. They often feel like when they look at pictures from the book or they look at other, home bars, they're like, oh, my bar is not worthy. Well, it's because that bar is 5 years in. That bar they have thrifted for years. They have created for years. They have done lots of work to get to that point. And so I don't think you should pass judgment on your home bar until you're at year 5, I guess is the way I would say it.
How much, like, if someone was to create a tiki bar, how much of an investment do you think that they got to get into? Should people be scared off? Like, because there is that mentality of, it's never going to be that, so why even bother?
Yeah.
Where should people start?
I wish I could just give you like a dollar figure, but here are, to me, there's factors. Mm-hmm. The factor is how much you're going to do yourself as opposed to contract out. So if you want a bar that's going to happen in 6 months, you're going to contract it out and you're going to spend a lot of money. If you want that same bar 5 years from now, you're going to do it yourself and you're going to learn skills and you're going to develop community. It's just a different process for different folks. Everyone can do it. It's just a matter of how quickly you want to do it and how much you're willing to spend.
Do you have any recommendations? So, like, I have an apartment. I don't have a house.
Uh-huh.
So I'm kind of limited in that I can't paint the walls. I can't put thatching up, or at least, I mean, I guess I could, but when they do an inspection for the fire alarms, they're gonna have something to say.
Yeah.
Did you see any creative ways of people utilizing space without tearing apart the structure?
Yeah, a couple of reactions to that. One I would say is that mid-mod style in Tiki is actually much more akin to that.
Mm-hmm.
You do still see, white walls or lightly painted walls or things like that in the mid-mod style. I have also seen people who do apartments that actually, rather than attach things to the wall, they actually build more like a picture frame with the actual stuff they would put on and actually attach it as a picture to the walls. So there's possibilities there. But I would say don't get stuck in that trader or adventurer style is the only style of Tiki to explore.
Have you ever thought about like categorizing the different styles? Is that a thing? So you'd have mid-mod century, you'd have the Disney thing.
I haven't thought about categorizing them. I've kind of leaned on Sven for those categories in the past, things like that. But yeah.
With that said, my friend, we're on overtime as always with these interviews. Over an hour has passed. Awesome. I do want to talk to you real quick. It's a Tiki Mug channel to search for Tiki.
Uh-huh.
So, did you go to any Tiki bars that did not have Tiki mugs?
No, every home bar that I visited had home Tiki, had Tiki mugs at this point. In fact, it is something that distinguishes a modern home Tiki bar from an authentic 50s or 60s, because when you look back at the pictures of 50s and 60s, Tiki mugs were not on display. They were more functional at that point. And so in today's bars, Tiki mugs are up on the shelves as, an art exhibit. And so,
yep.
Yeah.
That's a change that personally I'll welcome.
Yes,
because I'm obsessed with mugs.
and mugs are work of art. Frankie's Taboo Relics.
There you go, Taboo Relics.
Right now, yeah. And so, absolutely.
And I would have been rocking the Morongo from Tiki Pop, which thanks to a friend, Balboa Santi, for hooking me up with this mug years ago. This is my first Beach Bums Tiki Pop mug. Yep. If you're not following Beach Bums, give him a follow. And Frankie Taboo Relics, he's got a mug going on sale tomorrow. That's I believe tomorrow. Yep. Sconces, Polynesian sconces, and I think he 3D printed the. It's crazy. You just got to look at it. It's something I've never seen before, and you can hang them on the wall. Mugs are next level these days.
Absolutely.
So, with that said, so we talked a little bit about Polynesiacs. I do want to mention where people can buy the book.
Absolutely.
And is it wonkpress.com? We'll pull it up
it's
here.
wonkpress.com. Yes, it's available directly through Wonk Press. You can go to it through my website, which is polynesiacs.com. That's the website that has all my stories listed and additional photographs beyond what's in the book, things like that. But Wonk Press is the site to actually purchase the book. And I'm very grateful for the outpouring of love here. We're already past the first printing. We're into 1,600 copies of the book sold at this point. So we're into second printing sales.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It's been amazing. The outpouring of love is very much appreciated.
And this is, guys, this is a big book.
It's people have
full of colors.
It's like the textbook of Tiki is what I've been. I'm like, Tom, you're a never speaker. Like you created a textbook at this point. So,
or a weapon of war.
Yes.
Like you could take someone out.
One of the things people say is like, Tom, I really wanted to bring this with me to get your signature, but it's 8 pounds. It's 8 pounds. So, yeah.
That's all I could put in my suitcase, and even then they charged me.
Exactly.
Where do people go to follow you? Is it best to go to Polynesiacs.com or is there, follow you on Instagram?
Polynesiacs.com. I've got Instagram as well as Facebook for Polynesiacs, and you certainly can follow me on Tiki Tom-Tom on both of those, IG and Facebook as well.
And what should we be looking out for? Are you going to be doing more seminars?
I am. Certainly, I'll be continuing to do some teaching at Hele is coming up at this point. The new event, Tiki A Go-Go in Orlando, if you haven't heard about that, you should check it out. I really am excited about their focus on historic Florida Tiki at this point, which is going to be fun. And I'm doing a couple of visits, things like that, to New Orleans coming up, things like that. So my goal is actually, even though I'm thinking about a different focus for the next book, my goal is to get to 100 home tiki bars. I'm currently at 85, so 10 beyond the 75 in the book at this point. So I continue to do home visits and certainly welcome any invites.
There you go. There's the calling card. Guys, if you're watching, you got a home tiki bar and you want to invite Tiki Tom-Tom.
Absolutely.
He's open. With that said, we got a mug to give away. And this is the Jekyll mug, second edition Jekyll mug from Biggs Tiki, Biggs Studio. And fantastic artist based out of Las Vegas. He makes all these mugs himself. I think we should choose a winner. So let's take a closer look at the Jekyll mug. Here it is. And the winner is, congratulations to Jeff Ross. You have won this mug. So please contact me at admin@searchfortiki.com within 14 days. Send me an email, admin@searchfortiki.com, to collect your prize. Guys, you can enter these giveaways. We're doing them all through October individually, or you can just subscribe to our channel here on YouTube. We've got a ton of more artists coming, including this Sunday. We're going to be talking to the Headhunter in San Diego. So that's going to be a good one. I'm excited for that. We're going to keep the home tiki bar vibe.
Yes.
Rolling.
What a great bar
and experience.
Yeah.
With that said, Tiki Tom-Tom, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining me. And I can't wait to see what you got going on in the future with your books.
Thanks, Gabe.
And maybe I'll see you at Hele. Or I'll definitely see you at home. So
Absolutely.
Cheers, guys. Have a good night.